Welcome back to the slightly chilly Obsession Engineering workshop for the next day of the RVF project. Adam's here, he's looking very cold, so we better take some bits of motorbike apart and make it better. So today's task for Adam, to begin with, is going to be to take the fuel tank off, because the fuel tank needs stripping inside and sort of a sealant putting in it, so we can take the tank off, drain it, take the fuel tap and bits out of it, and Adam can start fiddling around with that. I can be doing some actual paying work when Adam's doing that, and when it's off, we can also rig up another fuel supply to it and see if we can actually get the bike running quite nicely. Being as the bike's only been sort of lightly assembled for collection purposes, taking the seat unit off will be particularly easy. Go, Adam! The only thing he needs to undo is these screws in here that hold the two sides of the seat unit together, and then we can take the two sides off and put them somewhere safe, even though that seat unit isn't actually going back on, I don't think. Is it?
No, we've got a new one.
We have China's finest plastic fairings.
Yes, being original, lots of the RVF fairing are getting big money. I think a nose cone on eBay at the minute's about 500 quid, which is more than I paid for a whole new set of fairings. So these are going to be put away somewhere really safe to maybe sold later on. Who knows?
Right then, what wonders do we have under here? Well, the subframe is painted black when it should actually be silvery grey, but never mind. They are horrible and rusty, so they will be getting changed later. There should be a rubber strap that runs under the battery so it doesn't fall out while you're riding around, but it is all there. There is even the original Honda toolkit, which is a bit rare, so that's quite cool. Right, nothing horrible, it's all sort of straight. So next thing is to take the bolt out the back of the tank, lift that off, and there's some bolts under the front, and then we can get to the fuel pipes. So now the tank is off. It actually isn't bolted at the front, it just sort of slides into the frame there and is just the one bolt at the back, so that was nice and easy. Right, the next thing I want Adam to do is take the top of the airbox off and make sure it has a clean air filter in it, and in this little crankcase breather bit, there should be a little piece of foam that just sort of stops the oil from the crankcase breathers going just straight into the airbox. It sort of, well, filters it out a little bit. So we'll see if that's all in there, and then might be inclined to rig up a off-skid fuel tank and see if we can get it running.
Hose is taken out of the way.
Let's have a look what we've won.
And we've won. Ooh!
Right, we do at least have a new air filter, so that's looking spiffing. The little sort of filter for the breathers is not there anymore. It's disintegrated, as they tended to do when they got soaked in oil and breathed through quite a lot. And the airbox could do with a little bit of a blowout from inside. So we'll get the airline on and all that, probably put some rags down the inlets first, blow all the bits out of the airbox, and then see if we can actually find the piece of foam that goes in there. So Adam's done a lovely job cleaning inside the airbox, so it's not going to suck any unpleasantness down into itself. We'll worry about the little filtery thing later. So Adam can put the air filter in the airbox lid back on, and then we can hook up a off-skid fuel supply down to here and get some fuel into its carbs. Right, on Hondas in general, and especially on these, this is the like vacuum feed for the fuel pump. So the fuel pump will only let fuel through when it's sucking, so we'll probably actually have to put a new piece of hose on that later because it's not great, but I've blocked it off for now so that when we're running the bike, it's not just sucking air in past the carb. Because at some point we may try and actually balance the carbs on this, depending on how nicely it runs, but that is awkward because right down there, right in that hole that you can't see very well, is like the air feed, like the vacuum feed that comes off the inlet tracks, and we'd have to get to all four of those to balance the carbs. They are notoriously awkward on these, so I'm kind of hoping it runs nicely, but what are the chances of that? Right, so we have a colostomy bag set up with some super unleaded in it. That is going down there into the carb feed. So we're going to hit the start button, and I suspect it might take a little while for it to pull some fuel through, but hopefully it'll fire up. Right then, Adam, have you got the choke out?
Personal question. Yes, choke is out.
Excellent. I thought that was just you playing with your knackers, but never mind. Right. Hit the tit, Adam. Turn the ignition key on. I feel we may be here a while. We've stopped because the battery's going flat. Right, we're going to go on to a slightly different technique to see if we can actually get it to fire. Is Adam's going to take the airbox lid and the airbox off it. And the next thing Adam's going to do is get some brake cleaner, and he's going to squirt it down the inlets, because brake cleaner is very, very flammable and has a very low octane rating, which means it actually burns easier than petrol. So, bit of a squirt down the holes. Splendid. Right, and now if we try it, we should get fire. Hopefully long enough for it to actually pull some petrol through. And there we go, a running motorbike-ish. Till it runs out of brake cleaner. Right. Well, it doesn't appear to be actually pulling any fuel out of the bowl, so that's a bit of a concern. Yeah. Right, might do a few more checks first before we get too carried away with this. Right, so we've had the bike running a couple of times with a bit of brake cleaner down its snorkel, but it didn't really want to keep running on its own fuel supply. And then the next attempt, the bike didn't want to start at all. So, we pulled the rear two spark plugs out because they're easy to get to. And what we got was something that looked horrible like this. It's oily and sort of slightly burnt and just looks minging. Hopefully we can actually focus on that for a minute. Yeah, there we go. That looks horrible. So that's why that didn't want to start again. So this one I took out and cleaned, and you can see it's actually a bit cleaner, and the sort of element bit that creates the spark is better. So we'll clean the rear ones, put them back in, see if we can get it to start enough to suck a bit of fuel through and try and get some life into the front cylinders. Because if you want to do the front spark plugs, they're buried behind the radiator, which is just awkward. Adam, would you like to tell the ladies and gentlemen of the internet why there was no fuel coming through?
So very much like an old bike where you turn the fuel tap to on. Same thing with colostomy setup. Fuel's not switched on.
Yeah, I might have filled it up and got it high enough, and then, shall we try this? And if we do that, and I suspect if we give that a few seconds, the carbs might actually be full of fuel.
No wonder there was no fuel coming out the carbs when you were under the screw.
I think
might
this
have something to do with it.
I think this might have a little bit to do with the not running on petrol thing.
I reckon it's going to run first time and sweet as a nut. Really.
So what lesson have we learnt today?
Double check Dave's work.
I was going to go with actually turn the fuel on, but yeah, why not? Let's see if it will start on its own fuel supply. And is the choke on? I wouldn't say it's especially happy yet, though. One advantage of having the fuel turned off is it doesn't leak straight out of the carbs and onto the floor. The engine is soaking wet. There is fuel dribbling onto the floor. Looks like we'll be taking the carbs off this then. And they are notoriously awkward. What fun! So, the plan of action to take the carbs off, we need to undo all these screws in here so that we can take the sort of airbox plate and everything off the carbs. And then, round the back of the carbs under there, with almost no access, are some little Jubilee clip things. So we'll need to undo those and pull the carbs off. But because the carbs sit in a V, and they all come off as one lump, the rubbers are sort of fighting against each other all the time, and they are a bit tight. So I'm sure that's going to be great fun for Adam. Right, so Adam has got the little airbox tray off, and he's now delving through the holes in the frame, as in through these sort of cutouts down here, to get to the Jubilee clips, the clips that hold the carbs onto the inlet rubbers. And you notice he's kneeling down. Firstly, because he likes kneeling down in front of other men, and secondly, because I haven't pumped the bench up for him. I could do, but I feel he wouldn't learn as well if I was doing his job for him.
Thanks.
Right then, Adam has been underneath doing his gynecology-esque things and undone all the clamps under the bottom. And we've got the choke cable and bits routed so that it can come out. So the next thing Adam needs to do is give them a pull. It's been a while since Adam's been on the pull, so this could be entertaining. There we go, look. They actually came off relatively easily, but then they haven't actually been on that long, I suppose. So once we've unravelled the throttle cables, we can put them on the bench and take them apart.
P.
Right, so that one under there, which would be number 2, is the one that's the wettest, so that's obviously the one that's been leaking. But I think it's probably worth us taking the float balls off all of them and having a bit of a look. While the carbs are off, it gives us a good opportunity to check the inlet rubbers and put some rag in there, and then actually have a little bit of a clean up in here because it's a little bit grotty.
Ooh, furry.
Yeah. Some things I like with a little bit of fur on them, but not that. What do we have here is 4 carburetors. So we've got little air bleedy thing holes there, and under here are the diaphragms that actually slide these bits up and down. This is the choke mechanism. So choke cable pulls that, and it pulls this lever behind me and opens a bit up here that lets more fuel into stuff. And it's all, you know, relatively simple in principle, but surprisingly complicated when you've got it in front of you. So, what are we going to do with these, being as they're quite dirty and they're clearly not functioning as they should, is we're going to strip them down and put them in the ultrasonic tank, give them a good blasting through, and then put them back together. If we find any seals or anything that are not looking very good, we shall get some more from somebody like Alan's Performance, because they're not that far down the road and they do postage. So strip them down, make them look a little bit nicer, put them back together, and hopefully have them not leaking. So Adam, your first job is to remove the easy stuff. So unclip the sort of fuel pipes, and then each of the carb tops, if we take the screws out of them, there will be a spring underneath there, and then the diaphragm that's like a little thin rubber sheet that holds the float. No, it doesn't. It holds the slide in place, and that will all just pull out the top. So we'll take the easy stuff apart first. So Adam has stripped the top half of the carbs off, and he's got the diaphragms out and the slides out, and they're over here. Everything is nicely arranged on the bench because Adam has watched loads of my videos on YouTube, and he knows how pedantic I get about stuff. So that's excellent work. Right, back to the carbs.
You mean your OCD's not gone mental?
No, I'm happy at the moment. Right, so that's the tops of those sort of taken apart. So if we turn them over, right, we can unscrew that, being careful not to lose the spring, and that's just the tick over adjuster, and all that does is literally hold the throttle slightly open. So that's the throttle mechanism, look, and that opens the butterfly side. And what happens is the butterfly opens, creates a negative air pressure area, and that sucks the carb float needle slide, those slidey bits. It sucks them up, so therefore letting more air in. So these are constant velocity cars because the airspeed is actually constant. So that's the nerdy bit over with. The interesting bit we're going to take apart next is we're going to take the float bowls off. So we're going to take the screws out, take the float bowls off, see how amazingly clean they're not inside, and then we'll decide on the next course of action. So the next thing to do is to take the floats out. Right, so Adam's going to poke it from the backside, so to speak. Then he can take that little pin out, like that. So pull that out, very nice. And then, if we lift the float out, we've got the float, which floats, and then this little bit dangles into the float bowl thing down here and seals into there, and that stops any more fuel coming in. So basically what happens is, once there's enough fuel in the float bowl, that loads up, because this is upside down now, that pushes down, pushes this into the hole, blocks any more fuel coming in. But, right, if you can see this sort of ring that's sort of polished up on this float needle, that then doesn't seal properly because it's worn, and then that lets fuel through, and then you get too much fuel in the float bowl, and it overflows to the overflow and dribbles out the side of the bike like we saw earlier. So that is no good. We're going to need a new one of those. It does get quite expensive when you start changing all the seals and bits and carbs, but if you don't change them all, then everything just leaks and sets your bike on fire. And that also gets quite expensive. This is the main jet that we've taken out one of the cylinders. You can see the number written on it. It's got K112, so there are KN 0.112 of a millimetre hole in it. So we're going to take them all out. Some bikes, the numbers are different because they're different sizes for different cylinders. This bike, they're all the same, so it doesn't matter if we mix them up. So we're going to take those out, the pilot jets out as well, clear as much of the sort of plastic and unnecessary bits out of these, get them as empty as possible, and then we're going to ultrasonic them. So this bit I'm holding here is the emulsion tube, and the main jet screws into that. And that sort of helps the fuel vaporise because you get a little bit of air coming through the tiny little holes in it. And this is the slide with the needle in it that sits in the carb top that goes up and down with the air pressure. So that basically, that way around, the needle drops into there, and obviously the taper fills more or less of this. So the more throttle opening you have, the more this opens, the more gap there is between the taper and the hole, and the more fuel you get in your engine. When you're on full throttle, that'll be pretty much out the hole, so you'll get lots of fuel. So obviously if you change the main jet size, you get more fuel. If you change the needle, you can have more or less fuel, and that's how you adjust your carburetors. Right then, we have the carbs mostly apart now. The choke bits just sort of unbolt from here and pretty much just slide out, so they've been removed. All the jets and bits are out of here. You will notice that this one and this one still have the like pilot air screws in because the tops are broken on them and we can't get them out. The other ones we have taken out, and they look like, yeah, they look like that, and they're little ones and just control how much air you get basically at idle. Right, so these are now ready to go in the ultrasonic tank, which is warming up. So I think it's about time for me and Adam to have a little bit of lunch. So this is the RVF fuel tank, and if we can look down in the hole in there, we can see a whole world of unpleasantness going on. So Adam's actually going to take that home with him, and he's going to clean it out and put some tank sealer in it, so I don't have to worry about it, which is excellent news. And there is going to be more cleaning going on any second now. While the carbs are off in the ultrasonic tank, and we're now waiting for some seals and bits to turn up for them, we're going to push the bike outside, and Adam's going to give it a lovely deep cleaning scrub. Oh yeah, look how nice that's coming up now. You can actually see some metal underneath some of the dirt.
So this stuff down here is properly tarnished, and that's the kind of colour that was up here. So it's going all right.
Day 2 of your apprenticeship of motorcycle restoration complete. What have you learnt today?
Clean bikes look better than dirty bikes. Make sure you've got the fuel on and it going inside the bike. What else really? Not to drop bits into the ultrasonic cleaner because that water gets bloody hot. Yeah, and you will need to order new parts. Well, thanks for watching, and join us again in the very near future for some more RVF goodness.